What's up everybody, ATP here and welcome to episode 2 of Mid-Season Evaluation. In this installment, I'll be giving an honest opinion and review of how the Houston Outlaws and LA Valiant have performed through their first 14 games of the 2019 Overwatch League season. Since the Outlaws technically have the worst record, I'll be starting with them since I'm going in order from worst to best record. So let's talk about the Houston Outlaws, shall we? I suppose we should start things off by taking a look at their record. Through 14 games, the Houston Outlaws are 3-11 with a minus 23 map differential, which is good enough for 18th place in the overall standings. Needless to say, it's been a pretty rough outing for the Outlaws so far, and I must say that I'm personally not all that surprised to see them struggling. I mean, just look at how their offseason went. All they did was go out and trade for Dante. Now granted, Dante was a nice pickup since he did solve their Tracer and Sombra problem, but there were still glaring weaknesses on this team and the Outlaws management did nothing to change that. Since their strong start to the 2018 season during Stage 1, this Outlaws team has never looked the same and honestly have just looked unbelievably mediocre. And it's carried over to Season 2 as well. The same players who were starting to look washed up by the end of Season 1 look the exact same. Players such as Raucus, Jake, and Coolmat, who used to be so good, just don't look like they have what it takes anymore. It really is a shame too. The three of them are awesome guys, so it hurts to see them as weaknesses on the team. This especially goes for Jake for me personally. He was so much fun to watch when he played for Team USA. That version of Jake could compete at a very high level while showcasing skills on a multitude of heroes. We'll talk more about the players in a little bit, so now let's talk about how Stage 1 went for the Outlaws. Coming into Stage 1, I saw the Outlaws as a meh team that did have some potential in the GOATS meta due to how dangerous a tank line of Muma, Coolmat, and Spree sounded. One of the biggest problems the Outlaws suffered from in Season 1 was their off-tank players lacking flexibility. Coolmat could play an okay Diva, but his Zarya was weak. Spree on the other hand was a solid Zarya, but had a Diva that was really lacking. In the GOATS meta, Houston could use the best of both worlds by playing their Diva and Zarya specialists at the same time. The drawback of this lineup is that you can't play any DPS at all, but when you're playing GOATS a majority of the time, this is a risk you can be willing to take without being too worried about it. The Outlaws surprisingly didn't show this lineup all that much during Stage 1, which I thought was a little disappointing. I'm assuming that it must not work all too well in scrims or something. Instead, the Outlaws decided to run Dante and Lynxer on Zarya, then have both Spree and Coolmat split time on Diva duty, and things went the way most of us saw coming using the somewhat questionable lineup. They got reverse swept by the Defiant and lost in 5 maps to the Uprising. Just barely losing both of these games shows that this team had some fight in them, but losing 2 more map 5s is not the best look considering the fact that their previous track record in map 5 situations was not already very good to begin with. By the time Stage 1 was over, the Outlaws had also lost to the NYXL and Atlanta Reign while only being able to defeat teams that were struggling. Their only solid win was against the Spark, but even that one isn't all that impressive since the Spark started to struggle during this time. Gushway's Korean still wasn't where it needed to be, and Nosmite was just bad. With that in mind, it's hard to say the Outlaws beat a solid team. Their only other wins came against the Mayhem and the Valiant. The Outlaws were yet again mediocre as ever with their 3-4 record during Stage 1. The two glaring weaknesses were clearly Raucus and Jake here. Raucus had some very questionable positioning that often got him killed, and Jake was far too aggressive on Brigitte, which usually led to him dying early in teamfights. The only real standout player was Dante, and it wasn't even because of his Zarya. His Sombra was the thing that impressed. In most cases, Houston looked pretty decent while running the Sombra GOATS composition. Although the Outlaws still weren't looking great, their fans did have some hope after finishing in 12th place during Stage 1. I for one was hoping the Outlaws would stop being so arrogant and make a move or two between Stages 1 and 2. Making an upgrade or two could go a long way for these guys, but guess what? Houston did absolutely nothing. But it's okay. You don't need to make any changes, right? Everybody will be fine because doing nothing just worked so well for your team last year. What's crazy is that the Outlaws somehow did even worse in Stage 2. I thought they'd still be mediocre for sure, but instead they were actually horrible. Not only did they go 0-7, but they also just got 4 map wins. I promise you that I'm not making this up either. They actually won just 4 maps in 7 games. One of those surprisingly came against the Titans, believe it or not. They looked like the superior team when they beat Vancouver on Busan. Running triple DPS Wrecking Ball compositions proved to be quite effective. The Outlaws actually look so much better on DPS than they do on GOATS. This composition has been Houston's only bright spot. Dante and Lynxer looked unbelievably strong while running this comp, and the rest of the team in general appeared to be more comfortable. Too bad GOATS was meta, so the Outlaws couldn't really take advantage of this. One other thing worth noting about the Outlaws during Stage 2 was that they tried putting Arhan in over Jake, which went about as well as you'd expect it to. Although Arhan looked no better than Jake, I can't blame the Outlaws for at least trying to change things up since Brig has clearly been a weakness for them. At the end of the day, nothing changes the fact that the Outlaws looked ridiculously bad during Stage 2. Even the Mayhem, who are widely regarded as the worst team in the Overwatch League, got more map wins. During this break, the Outlaws really need to rest up and prepare to learn from their previous in-game mistakes. I'm also praying that they make some sort of move. I know their team is about to be sold and everything, so their focus isn't completely on making the roster better, but please, Outlaws, do something. I'm begging you. Your loyal fans deserve so much better than this, Outlaws. Try and upgrade at least one position. I'm begging you. Just do it. Get a new flex support or something. But knowing them, they trust in Ruckus 100%, even though he's clearly kind of washed up at this point. They had a golden opportunity to get Sleepy from the shock, but they decided to do nothing while watching the Justice swoop in and take him. And it's such a shame too. Sleepy would have been a great fit on a roster full of Americans. It's not the end of the world though. There's other players you can sign. If the Outlaws know what's good for them, they should be looking to get someone like Crimzo. Because the Outlaws have refused to address problems that need fixing, and they've only gotten 3 wins in their first 14 games, I have no choice but to give them a D for their midseason grade. Okay, I think that's enough about me roasting the Outlaws. Let's move on to the Valiant. The Los Angeles Valiant find themselves in a very similar situation to the Outlaws. They too only have 3 wins through 14 games, but find themselves in 17th place over the Outlaws since their map differential isn't quite as bad. If I were to summarize the Valiant's midseason performance using one word, then my word of choice would be disappointing. Going from a top team in Overwatch League Season 1 that finished in 2nd place during the regular season and won Stage 4 to this is just sad. Let's take a look at how things went wrong. Coming into the 2019 Overwatch League season, the LA Valiant made a handful of changes to their roster. They started by parting ways with Soon, who decided to go play for the Paris Eternal. Another noticeable roster move that happened was the signing of Kuki, who looked like a decent backup main tank to have play behind Fate. One other big change the Valiant decided to make was to transition Kareev back into DPS for a second time, which meant that he would likely be handling the hit scan and Zarya duty while Izayaki would be taking over the flex support role. While I personally have always believed Kareev was most effective on flex support, I was willing to put my trust in this decision since Kareev has plenty of past experience on this role. Although the meta was different from anything we had seen from the inaugural season, I still expected the Valiant to be a good team. Maybe not top 5 like they used to be back in the day, but still good nonetheless. Stage 1 ended up holding a lot of surprises for these guys. Not only did they go 0-7, but Custa found himself being benched in favor of Kuki for most of this stage. This is something that I just could not wrap my head around, and I still don't fully understand what Coach Moon was thinking when making this decision. Sure, Kuki has good communication due to his main tank roots, but it's also worth noting that he had no previous experience playing main support. He played main tank for his entire career up until this point. Not only has Custa been playing support for his entire career, but he's also been one of the main shot callers and leaders on the Valiant ever since being traded to them. And the success this team has had with him speaks for itself. During Season 1, not only did he help bring home a Stage 4 title, but also a total regular season record of 16-4. There was no excuse to have such a pivotal piece on your team sit on the bench. I don't care what the reasoning the coaching staff had behind this move. This was a boneheaded decision. I'll be brutally honest. Kuki looked terrible 90% of the time he was playing. His Lucio was not good, and it's sadly not his fault either. I can't even be mad at the guy. He was asked to change roles. Swapping positions is never an easy transition, and it requires time to adjust. I'm more mad at the coaches, if anything, because I personally think this was all completely unnecessary. Custa probably should have been playing this entire time, but then again, it's not like he made any sort of difference. They were still losing even when he was playing in the game. The Valiant were no longer the same dominant team. They were struggling big time on goats. Fate was surprisingly feeding, which is something you'd never think he would ever do since he was a top 5 main tank in the league last year. Kareev was launching grabs straight into Diva defense matrix more often than I would like to admit, and Agilities looked like a very mediocre Brig. His over-aggression and questionable rally usages were a huge slap in the face. The only players that looked alright in my opinion were Space and Izayaki. Izayaki was definitely a pleasant surprise to watch if you're a Valiant fan. The Valiant kept bragging about him over the offseason, and I can fully see why now. The man has some skill, but it wasn't all good from him though. He died a bit too often for my liking, which is something you simply can't have. Discord Orb and Trance are pivotal abilities in this meta, and not having them on hand puts you at a serious disadvantage during a team fight. All of these combined underlying issues led to an unexpected and very disappointing Stage 1 for the Valiant. Thankfully, the LA Valiant didn't just sit there and do nothing about their problems, unlike a certain team we talked about earlier. They made a few adjustments during the transition to the next stage to try and get this team going back in the right direction. They started by parting ways with Coach Moon. Moon worked wonders for the team last year, but the whole Kuki main support thing and moving Kareev to DPS for a second time really made you question if he was right for the job anymore. Next, the team fully committed to KSF as the starting Zarya player over Kareev. At the time, I was a little bit worried about this since KSF had never shown any sort of improvement since joining the team and was always a rather pedestrian player. Surprisingly though, the guy finally showed some improvement during Stage 2 by appearing to be a competent Zarya. He even made a few nice plays on Widow, which was a great sight to see if you were a Valiant fan. The third and final change made by the team was transitioning Kareev back to flex support, and I can't help but feel bad for the guy. He started his career on DPS, then became a flex support when joining the Immortals. Next he went back to DPS during Stage 2 of last year, then back to flex support the following stage. And now he's played both positions this year as well. Hopefully he stays on flex support from here on out. I cannot even begin to imagine how difficult it is to keep on switching back and forth the way he has. While Stage 2 wasn't anything to be super proud of, the Valiant still managed to go 3-4 while at least appearing to be competitive in a couple of their losses. They even ended it on the right foot by defeating the Hunters and ruining their stage playoff hopes. Ending your stage on a good note can sometimes be the thing a team needs to build some momentum moving forward. Look at the Gladiators. They ended Stage 1 on a 2-game winning streak, then proceeded to win their first 6 games of Stage 2. The Valiant won a big game to end their stage and were finally showing signs of improvement. Maybe they would be a competitive team again soon. Well, that's what I was originally thinking at least. Shortly before the playoffs finished, the Valiant made a trade with the Florida Mayhem, sending Fate over to Florida in return for McGravy, Fact Fiction, and Shax. It's hard to say if the Valiant will improve from this trade. Shax might be a decent Zarya, and maybe Fact Fiction makes for a good main tank replacement, but they could also be bad at the same time, so who knows. A lot of Valiant fans are not happy with this trade, and I can't blame any of them for feeling this way. Fate was a major contributor toward the team's success last year, and seeing him go in return for nothing spectacular has to feel frustrating. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Valiant lost this trade for sure though. The players they received could be useful if they realize their potential, and the stats also suggest that Fate was kind of a feeder. Ranking the top 20 for deaths per 10 minutes at 6.29 is not very pretty. The LA Valiant's future remains uncertain. I for one have no idea if this move works out for them or not. The Fate trade could just be the beginning for all we know too. More moves could be on the way, so be sure to pay close attention to this team. Because of their underwhelming performance while having reasonably high expectations, I've decided to give them a D for their midseason grade. Starting the year off 0-8 when you were one of the top dogs last year is simply unacceptable. You had virtually the same team too. How did things go downhill so fast? In my opinion, there is simply no excuse. People expected you to at least be decent, and you failed to even do that much. You're a bottom 4 team right now, Valiant. Hopefully you can turn things around. With that being said, that concludes episode 2 of Midseason Evaluation. What do you guys think of my reviews? Make sure to let me know down in the comment section and leave your own grade for both of these teams while you're at it. If you enjoyed this content, then be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with the series. As always, thank you all so much for watching today's video, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.